The distress beacon had been screaming for 6 hours before anyone answered it. Lieutenant Cole Harrington was not supposed to be in Sector 9. His patrol route ended at the outer ring of the Velthari exclusion zone, a dead band of space that the Galactic Council had carved out 18 months ago after the war nearly ended 3 civilizations at once. Humans had been told, politely but firmly, to stay on their side of the line. Cole had been on his side of the line when the beacon hit his scanner. It was a frequency he did not recognize. Not human. Not Council standard. Something older, something that came out of the deep band spectrum where only military-grade transmitters operated. He ran the signature twice. Then a third time. Velthari Royal Encryption. He sat back in his seat and stared at the blinking light on his console for 4 full seconds. The Velthari did not send distress calls. The Velthari did not ask for help. The Velthari were the dominant species of the Western Arm, 600 years older than humanity as a spacefaring civilization. And their king, Vareth Sul Khan, had made it clear at every diplomatic table that humans were, at best, a tolerable nuisance, and at worst, a species that had been allowed to survive its own infancy, only because the Council found them mildly entertaining. The beacon was coming from inside the exclusion zone. Cole keyed his comm. "Command, this is Harrington. I'm picking up a Velthari Royal Distress signature at grid 7904 inside the exclusion zone. Requesting guidance." Static, and then a voice that sounded like it was reading from a manual. "Lieutenant, the exclusion zone is a restricted area. You are not authorized to cross. I know that. I'm asking what I should do about the beacon. Document it and continue your patrol." Cole looked at the beacon. It pulsed every 2 seconds, steady and urgent. He thought about what royal encryption meant. It meant someone in the direct line of the Velthari throne was in trouble. It meant the distress had been broadcasting for 6 hours and no Velthari ship had responded, which meant either they couldn't or they didn't know. He closed the comm channel. He crossed the line. The exclusion zone looked like nothing. Space always looked like nothing, which was one of the things that made it dangerous. You could fly straight into a debris field, a radiation bloom, and a gravitational trap, and the view through your cockpit would be identical right up until it wasn't. What Cole found at grid 7904 was a Velthari scout ship with its left drive nacelle completely sheared off. The hull was intact on 3 sides. The 4th side had a hole in it, the size of a transport truck, sealed by an emergency membrane that was already showing stress fractures. He docked before he thought too carefully about what he was doing. The inside of the ship smelled like copper and ozone. The lighting was emergency red, deep and dim, nothing like human emergency lighting. He swept his helmet light through the corridor and found 2 Velthari crew members in the first cabin, both unconscious, both alive, based on the chest movement he could see from the doorway. He moved to the back of the ship. The last cabin had a door that was buckled inward from some kind of impact. He pulled it open with both hands and found her. She was young, even by Velthari standards, which he knew enough to recognize from the silver banding on her head crest that had not yet deepened to the gold it would become in adulthood. She was pinned under a collapsed support strut, her leg at an angle that made Cole's teeth ache just to look at it. She was conscious. Her eyes, which were the deep amber color of old glass, found him immediately. She said something in Velthari. He did not speak Velthari. He held up both hands, palms out, the gesture he had been told was universal in the council races for, no harm. She said something else, shorter, and he caught one word he recognized. Vardek. Help. Cole got to work. The strut weighed more than it looked. Velthari engineering favored dense alloys. and this particular beam had the mass of a small vehicle. He found a pry bar in the emergency kit on the wall and worked the angle for 3 minutes before he got enough leverage to shift it. She made no sound the entire time, which cost her something he could see in her face. When the strut came free, he caught her before she could fall. She was lighter than he expected, the hollow-boned physiology that made Velthari look imposing, but kept them quick. He got her arm over his shoulder and started moving. The emergency membrane on the hull breech was at 60% integrity when he reached the corridor. 40% by the time he reached the airlock. He went back for the 2 crew members. It took 3 trips and 11 minutes, and by the time he sealed his ship's airlock behind him, the membrane had failed completely, and the Velthari scout was venting atmosphere into the void. He put all 3 of them in his ship's small medical bay, ran what scans he could with hardware that was not designed for alien physiology, and called command. This time, someone actually picked up. "Lieutenant Harrington." The voice was clipped and unhappy. "You have crossed into a restricted zone. I have 3 Velthari nationals aboard my ship, one with significant injuries. I need a medical vessel, and I need someone to contact the Velthari fleet." A very long pause. "Say again your passenger manifest." Cole looked through the small porthole in the medical bay door. The young Velthari was sitting up against the wall. Oh, she was watching him with those amber eyes. There was something in her expression he could not read, but it wasn't fear. 3 Velthari nationals," he said. "One of them is wearing a royal crest." The silence on the other end of the comm lasted long enough that he checked to make sure the channel was still open. It was. Whoever was on the other end of that line was having a very bad day, and it was about to get significantly more complicated for everyone. Cole Harrington sat down in his pilot's seat, looked at the stars outside his cockpit, and waited for the galaxy to figure out what came next. He had not saved her because of who she was. He had saved her because she had said Vardek, and he was the only one who had been close enough to hear it. The Velthari fleet arrived in 4 hours. Not a medical vessel, and not a diplomatic shuttle. 7 warships, each one twice the size of anything in the human patrol fleet, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in a formation that Cole recognized from tactical briefings as a hunt pattern. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to find something. He found out very quickly that the something was her. Her name was Sail Vareth Sul, which his translation unit rendered as Sail of the Line of Vareth, which meant she was not just royal. She was the king's daughter, the only daughter, the one that every intelligence report from the past 3 years had listed as the most protected individual in the Western Arm. She had been on an unauthorized observation flight, which the surviving crew members explained with a particular combination of shame and relief that Cole recognized as people who had survived something they had no business surviving. She had wanted to see the exclusion zone. She had wanted to see the edge of the disputed territory with her own eyes. The debris that had hit them was old, a dead satellite from before the war, tumbling in an unregistered orbit. No one's fault. Just the universe doing what it always did, which was exist without caring about anyone's plans. The senior commander of the Velthari fleet was named Veth Korayan, and he boarded Cole's ship with 6 armed guards, and the expression of someone who had spent 4 hours preparing to be very angry, and had not yet decided who deserved it most. He stopped when he saw Sail. She was standing on her own by then, having refused to remain lying down with a stubbornness that Cole had found both impressive and medically inadvisable. Her leg had been splinted with materials from his emergency kit. She had one hand on the wall for balance, and her chin at an elevation that made it clear she was not interested in appearing diminished. She spoke to Veth Karan for almost 2 minutes before he could respond. When he finally spoke, his translation unit clicked on, and his voice came out in clipped Galactic standard. "You are Lieutenant Harrington." "Yes." "You entered the exclusion zone." "Yes." "In violation of council law and bilateral treaty." "Yes." Beth Quran looked at him for a long time. "Why?" Cole had been thinking about how to answer this question for 4 hours. He had considered several versions: diplomatic versions, legal versions, versions that explained the beacon and the encryption signature and the chain of decisions that had seemed obvious in the moment, and now, surrounded by 7 warships, required a little more framing. He went with the simplest one. She was in there. Veth Koran was silent. Behind him, one of the guards shifted, armor plates clicking softly. Sile said something in Velthari. Just a few words. Veth Koran's expression changed, not dramatically. The Velthari were not demonstrative in the way humans were. But something in the set of his jaw altered. Some weight redistributed itself. And when he looked back at Cole, it was with a different quality of attention. "You will come with us," he said. "You and your ship. This is not a request." Cole had expected that. What he had not expected was for Sail, as the guards began moving around him, to reach out and briefly grip his forearm with her 3-fingered hand. Her grip was strong despite the injury. She held it for exactly 2 seconds and then let go. She did not look at him when she did it. But the guards stopped moving until she had finished. Cole followed them to the flagship and told himself that this was probably fine. Probably. The flagship was called the Verath Dawn, which his translation unit said meant something closer to the light that comes before the sun is visible, which was either poetic or ominous, depending on how the next few hours went. He was taken to a room that was not a cell, but had no door handle on the inside, which was a meaningful distinction. The room was large by the standards of a warship, although with a curved ceiling and furniture that was scaled for Velthari physiology, but had clearly been adjusted in the last hour. Someone had brought in a human-height chair. Someone had left a protein pack from a human military ration on the table. Veth Koran came back 2 hours later. "King Vareth Sul Khan wishes to speak with you," he said. Cole stood up. "Now?" he asked. "The king does not schedule calls," Veth Koran said, which was the most Velthari sentence Cole had ever heard. The communication terminal was in the next room, a chamber that was clearly designed for formal contact rather than conversation. The walls were dark, and the screen that occupied one entire end of the room was active, showing a face that Cole had seen in intelligence briefings and diplomatic records, but never like this. Up close, looking directly at him. Vareth Sul Khan was old in the way that mountains were old, the kind of old that compressed itself into something harder than it had started as. His crest was fully gold, deep and saturated, and his amber eyes were the same color as his daughter's, except where hers were watchful. His were the eyes of something that had made decisions that ended eras. He did not speak for several seconds. Cole did not fill the silence. "You entered forbidden space," the king said. His galactic standard was perfect. No translation unit, no lag. He had spoken it for decades. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You recovered my daughter." "Yes." "You went back into the ship 3 times." This was not a question, so Cole did not answer it. The king's eyes moved over him with the unhurried patience of someone who was accustomed to having enough time to look at things properly. "What do you want?" the king asked. Cole frowned. "I don't understand the question." "Every creature wants something. You crossed into forbidden space and saved a royal life. You have leverage that most beings would spend years cultivating. I am asking what you intend to do with it." Cole thought about it honestly, which was the only way he knew how to think. "I want to go home," he said. "I want to not be court-martialed for crossing the line. That's the whole list." The king was quiet again. "You saved my daughter," he said, "and you want to go home." "Yes, Your Majesty." Something moved in the king's expression that Cole could not identify. It was not amusement exactly, and it was something that sat behind amusement, something older. "That is not how this works," the king said. "Not in our tradition, not with what you have done." He paused. "I have consulted with my advisors. I have spoken with my daughter at length. There is a debt here that must be settled in a manner that has meaning. I will send an envoy to the Human Council. You will not be court-martialed." "Thank you," Cole said. "That is not the settlement," the king said. "That is the correction of an error. The settlement is different." Cole waited. "I am offering you a place in my household," the king said, "not as a servant, as a ward of the throne. It is an honor we have given to other species twice in 600 years. You would have protection, resources, and standing in the Western Arm that no human currently possesses." Cole stared at the screen. "In exchange," the king continued, "you would agree to serve as an official liaison between your species and mine for a period of 5 years. You would live on the Velthari homeworld. You would learn our language, our law, and our customs." He paused again. "And you would be formally bonded to my daughter's household as her designated protector. It is a ceremonial role. It carries weight." The room was very quiet. "Your daughter," Cole said carefully, "would need to agree to that." "She proposed it," the king said. Cole sat with that information for a moment. "Why?" he asked. "Because she's practical," the king said. "And because among my people, a debt of life is not a small thing. She will not carry it unresolved, and this is her resolution." He paused. "And because, in her words, you went back 3 times, and that is a thing she has not forgotten." Cole looked at his hands. "I need time to think," he said. "You have until morning," the king said, which was either generous or the opposite, depending on which side of the conversation you were on. The screen went dark. Cole sat in the formal chamber of a Velthari warship, surrounded by stars, with a decision in his lap that had not existed 24 hours ago. He thought about home. He thought about the beacon. He thought about a voice saying Vardek in a broken ship, and a hand that had gripped his arm for exactly 2 seconds. He had not known who she was when he went back the second time, or the third. Morning came the way mornings come on warships. Not with light, but with a change in the low hum of the engines, a shift in the air recycling cycle, small mechanical signals that something had turned over. Cole had not slept. He had thought, which was different. When Veth Karan came to collect him, Cole was already standing. "I have conditions," Cole said. Veth Karan's head tilted. "The king does not receive conditions." "Then he'll receive them as suggestions," Cole said. "Either way, I need to say them before I give him an answer." Veth Karan looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the communication chamber, which Cole took as an invitation. The king was already on the screen. Cole did not sit down. "3 things," he said. "First, any human national in distress inside the exclusion zone gets assistance without treaty violation, and the zone has to have a humanitarian exception. Second, I want the 2 crew members who were on that scout ship returned to their families with full honors, not quietly filed away because they let the princess take an unauthorized trip. They kept her alive long enough for me to get there. Third, I want the right to leave if this arrangement stops working. 5 years is the term you named. I will honor 5 years, but I want the exit to exist. The king listened. He did not speak immediately. Behind Cole, the door to the chamber was open, which it had not been before. He heard a sound in the corridor and did not turn around, but the acoustics of the room told him someone was standing just outside. "These are not small things," the king said. "No," Cole agreed. "The first would require council renegotiation." "I know." "The second involves an internal household matter." "I know that too." "The third," the king said, and stopped. The sound in the corridor moved. A figure came into Cole's peripheral vision, stopping just inside the doorway. Sayel. She was moving without the wall now, her leg in a proper Velthari field splint, her crest catching the low light of the chamber. She did not look at her father on the screen. She looked at Cole. She said something in Velthari. The king responded briefly. She said something else, 3 words, with a finality that did not need translation. "My daughter says," the king said slowly, "that all 3 conditions are reasonable, and that a protector who negotiates badly is no protector at all." Cole looked at Sail. She raised her chin exactly the way she had raised it in the medical bay of his ship. With the wall behind her, and her leg at a wrong angle, and the emergency lighting turning everything the color of old blood. "Do we have an agreement?" Cole asked. The king looked at his daughter. His daughter did not look at him. "We have an agreement," the king said. Cole exhaled. It was a small sound. It was the sound of a man who had crossed a line he was told not to cross and found, on the other side, that the universe had not ended. It had, in fact, gotten considerably larger. The Velthari homeworld was called Velsora, which translated to something that Cole's unit rendered as the ground that does not move, which he eventually understood was not a geological description, but a philosophical one. The Velthari believed the homeworld was the fixed point around which the rest of existence orbited. Everything else was temporary. Velsora endured. It was also, objectively, one of the most striking places Cole had ever seen. The capital city was built into a mountain range that stretched for 800 kilometers along the equatorial belt. Structures grown from the rock rather than placed on it. Towers and walkways, and great curving halls that looked less like architecture and more like the mountain had decided to elaborate on itself. The light was different here. The star Velsora orbited was cooler than Earth's sun, and everything was bathed in a quality of illumination that made colors look deeper, more saturated, the way Earth only looked for 20 minutes after a rainstorm. Cole spent his first 3 weeks making mistakes. He said the wrong thing at a formal meal, and the table went silent for 90 seconds. He walked into a section of the palace that was designated for a category of person he did not yet have a word for, and was quietly redirected by a guard who was very polite about it. He addressed an elder council member by the wrong honorific, and the elder had stared at him with an expression that communicated, across every species barrier, that she was choosing patience as an act of deliberate will. He kept a log. Every mistake went in the log. Every correction, every piece of context he had been missing. He went through it every night before he slept. Not because he was afraid of failing, but because he was determined not to make the same error twice. Sile found out about the log 3 months in. She had been assigned as his formal guide for the cultural orientation period, which was, as far as Cole could tell, the Velthari equivalent of making sure the new ward did not accidentally start a diplomatic incident in the first year. It was not something she had been ordered to do. He knew this because Veth Quran had mentioned it once. with the careful neutrality of someone who was not going to offer an opinion on it. She had come to his quarters to review the next week's schedule and found the log open on the table. She picked it up before he could say anything. She read for 5 minutes. Cole waited. "You have the wrong word for this entry," she said finally, pointing at a notation from his 3rd week. "This phrase does not mean elder with authority over civic matters. It means something closer to the one who has been here long enough to carry the weight of memory. It is a term of deep respect." "I know that now," Cole said. "I didn't then." She turned a page. "You also wrote that the silence at the meal was because you offended the table. Wasn't it?" "No." She set the log down. "The silence was because you used the past tense of a verb that is traditionally reserved for describing things that have died. You called the treaty format deceased. It was grammatically incorrect in a way that was also unexpectedly poetic. Everyone was quiet because they were deciding if you had done it deliberately." Cole stared at her. "Had I?" "No. But the effect was interesting." Something shifted at the edge of her expression. A compression of the skin beside her eyes that he had learned was the Velthari equivalent of something that was not quite amusement, but lived in the same neighborhood. "The elder you addressed incorrectly told my father afterward that the human was either very stupid or very interesting. She has not decided which." "Which is better?" Cole asked. "Interesting," Sael said immediately. "Stupid can be ignored. Interesting requires attention." She set the log back on the table and looked at him. In 3 months, he had gotten better at reading her face. Not fluent, not even conversational, but past the point where everything looked like the same careful blankness. There were gradations. Right now, she looked like someone who had come to discuss a schedule, and had ended up somewhere she had not intended to be. Nan was deciding how she felt about it. "Why do you keep the log?" she asked. "Because I don't want to make the same mistake twice." Most beings who make mistakes prefer not to look at them again. Most beings aren't trying to do something they've never done before in a place they've never been, Cole said. "I don't have the luxury of forgetting." She was quiet for a moment. "The crew members," she said. "Veth Karan told me your condition." "I meant it." "I know." She looked at the wall for a moment, then back at him. "Kyle and Suan were returned to their families with honors 3 weeks after we arrived here. My father made a public announcement." Cole had not known this. No one had told him. "Thank you," he said, though he was not sure who he was thanking. "Do not thank me," Sael said. "You negotiated for them. They were yours to recover." She picked up the schedule tablet. "You have a language session tomorrow at the 6th hour. You have been mispronouncing the formal greeting for 3 months." "I know." "Do you know how?" "I'm pitching the second syllable wrong." She corrected him, a single precise sound. Just the word, spoken the right way. He repeated it. She corrected him again. He tried again. She corrected him a 3rd time, and this time her expression shifted into something new, something he did not have a word for yet, something that was patient and exasperated, and possibly other things underneath. "Again," she said. He got it right on the 4th attempt. She did not say well done. She did not say good. She simply marked something on the tablet and moved to the next item on the schedule. But the correction she had made was very precise, and the care that had gone into it was not small, and Cole filed that away in the log that night in a section that had no heading, because he did not know what to call it yet. He thought he would eventually. 5 years passed the way significant time passes, not evenly, not smoothly, but in layers, some thin and unmemorable and some so dense with event that a single week could contain more substance than a previous year. Cole's Galactic Standard log sat on a shelf in his quarters, full. He had started a second one. The Velthari language section was the largest portion of the second one. Sael had told him at the end of his second year that his pronunciation was no longer embarrassing, which he had received as one of the finest compliments of his professional life. The humanitarian exception to the Exclusion Zone Treaty had been ratified by the Galactic Council in his 18th month on Velsora. It had taken a Velthari king making a personal argument to the full council body, an argument that included a direct reference to a human lieutenant who had crossed a line and gone back 3 times. And that argument had carried because there was something in the simplicity of it that even 600-year-old civilizations could not dismiss. 2 human vessels had used the exception in the following years. Both times, Velthari ships had provided assistance. Cole knew about both cases because Sael told him, in the same way she had told him about Kale and Suin, as information he was owed, and that she delivered without ceremony. The formal period of his ward status ended on a morning in the deep season, which was Velsora's equivalent of late autumn, when the light went amber and the city seemed to compress itself against the mountain range as though bracing for something. Veth Korian came to his quarters at the 7th hour with the formal documentation. "Your 5 years are complete," Veth Koran said. "The terms of the agreement have been fulfilled. You are free to return to human space." Cole held the documentation. He looked at it for a long time. "I know," he said. "Your departure can be arranged within the week," Veth Koran said. "The king has authorized a formal send-off, honors equivalent to a council ambassador." "That's generous." "It is appropriate," Veth Koran said, with the tone of someone correcting a small inaccuracy. "What you did in Sector 9 changed the relationship between our people and yours. The king does not assign generosity to what is owed." Veth Koran left. Cole sat with the documentation. He thought about the patrol route he had been running 5 years ago. The outer ring of the exclusion zone, the part of space that had been his to watch and nothing else. He thought about a beacon that had no business being where it was, a frequency he had run twice and then a third time, a light blinking every 2 seconds in the dark. He thought about going back for the second crew member, and the third. He put the documentation on the table. Sael was in the Eastern Hall when he found her, reviewing something on a council tablet with the focused efficiency of someone who treated her time as a finite resource not to be squandered. She looked up when he entered, which she did not always do, and he took that as a signal that she had known he was coming. "Veth Koran came," Cole said. "I know. 5 years." "Yes." He sat down across from her, in the chair that had been in this room for 3 years, adjusted to human height, put there sometime in his second year when it became clear that he spent enough time in the Eastern Hall that the alternative was impractical. "The exception is still in effect," he said. "It will remain in effect. The council liaison position that was created out of my ward status, that still exists." "It does." She set down the tablet. "The position does not require you to fill it from Velsora. A human council liaison can operate from human space." "That's true," Cole said. She looked at him. 5 years had not changed the amber of her eyes. The silver of her crest had deepened, moving toward the gold it would eventually become, but was not yet there. Still in the transition, still carrying both colors at once. "You went back 3 times, she said. It was not the first time she had said it. It was the first time she had said it like this, without the weight of debt in it, without the formal register of settlement and honor. Just as a fact. Just as the thing that it was. I went back because you were in there, he said, which was the same thing he had told her father, with the same simplicity, because it was the only version that was true. She was quiet for a moment. Outside the eastern hall, the amber light of the deep season pressed against the windows, and the city made its sounds, stone and wind, and the distant tone of a Velthari bell marking the hour. The ward arrangement ends today, she said. Yes. But the liaison position continues. Yes. And the liaison, she said, is not required to be elsewhere. Cole looked at her. She looked back at him. No, he said. The liaison is not required to be elsewhere. She picked up her tablet. You have a council meeting tomorrow at the 4th hour, she said. You have been pronouncing the lead ambassador's honorific incorrectly for 6 months. I corrected you twice. I'm not correcting you a 3rd time. Understood, Cole said. Again, she said, and spoke the honorific. He repeated it. She made a small mark on the tablet. She did not say well done. She did not say good. Outside, the amber light held the city steady, the ground that does not move, the fixed point around which everything else turned. And Cole Harrington, who had crossed a line he was told not to cross and found a larger world on the other side, sat in a chair that had been adjusted for him in a hall where he had spent 3 years of his 5, and said nothing, because sometimes the best things were the ones that did not need saying. The beacon had been screaming for 6 hours before anyone answered it. He was glad he had been the one close enough to hear.